Hello, everyone. So sorry for the delay. We just catching up, making sure this is the best use of everyone's time today, making sure it's packed with tons of value and everything you guys can use to monetize. We've had a very busy day over here. I'm sure many people have seen the announcement we made this morning announcing CPM-based advertising deals, which should unlock huge monetization opportunities for everyone in the beehiiv network. Just as some housekeeping, those advertising features are standard with our paid plans. So if you are not on a scale or max plan, then that's how you get access. But as soon as you do, you'll start getting those offers. Today's gonna be a little bit different in that Jake is gonna run the show for most of it. He's got a deck prepared. We'll talk back and forth a little bit. We also have some surprise special guests that are gonna join us as well. I'll let you take it from here, introduce Chris, and we can get started.
Cool. So essentially, we're going to go through a bunch of different things related to advertising in newsletters. Going to talk over a little bit of an overview about advertising capabilities on beehiiv, talk a little bit about the advertiser perspective. As I just mentioned, we have Chris on the call. Going to grab a couple minutes from him and hear about newsletter advertising from an advertiser perspective. And then we'll go into kind of a nitty-gritty 101 on how to monetize your newsletter with the ad network. So everything from how it works, how do you actually put a newsletter or an ad in your newsletter, and some best practices. We'll talk about CPM. We just launched that today. We're super pumped about it. And then we'll open up for questions. Sweet. So really quick overview. The beehiiv ad network, essentially beehiiv, as you know, is the most powerful newsletter platform in the world. It enables newsletters to grow, publish, monetize their newsletter. There's about 20,000 newsletters that run their newsletter on beehiiv. What we've done with the ad network is built an ad network on top of that network of 20,000 newsletters, which enables advertisers to come to us and say, hey, we want to reach this niche audience or this broad pool of folks or people that care about XYZ content. And it enables us to service them by delivering advertisements in newsletters that relate to all those topics or speak to their customers. Saves advertisers a ton of time. We'll talk a little bit about that with Chris, and it enables them to scale the newsletter channel. From the publisher perspective, the ad network enables publishers to monetize their work, sorry about the typo there, without even moving a finger. So we deliver ad opportunities to publishers. You can accept them, place them in your newsletter, and you can earn based on a click that you drive or the number of impressions and opens that you drive to the advertiser. So a little bit from the advertiser perspective. So when we speak with advertisers, especially advertisers that are just starting to get into the newsletter game, we like to talk about the concept of trust and context. So from an advertiser perspective, when they view newsletters, there's a lot of components to advertising in newsletters that is very attractive. If you're on the call and you're an advertiser, we'd love to hear your perspective. If you're on the call and you're a publisher, I think this type of context is important to understand what an advertiser is expecting and why they're working with newsletters. So even if you're not working with the ad network, you're working with advertisers directly, you can learn a little bit about how to make their ads more effective and build a long-term partnership. But from an advertiser perspective, the newsletter experience is very lean in. What we mean by that is that if you compare to a Facebook or an Instagram, typically folks are very lean back. They're kind of hanging out on their couch, they're scrolling, they're waiting for coffee, they're just mindlessly scrolling and doom scrolling past content. You might see an ad, you might not remember it, but you're not really engaged in the content in a way that you would be if you're reading a newsletter. When you're reading a newsletter, we like to say that readers invite that writer into their inbox. They've decided to read the content. They're spending minutes with content and they're actually ingesting it versus just mindlessly scrolling past different pieces of content that are not necessarily contextually related. When an ad is in a newsletter, that ad is typically embedded directly into the content, especially the way that we do it with the ad network. So when the reader is reading that content, it feels like an ad is coming from the writer in terms of an endorsement or in the way of an endorsement, and you're reading it with the same interest that you are as you're reading the rest of the content. So instead of doom scrolling past an ad, you're actually reading the ad, you listen to it, you understand that it's coming from the writer, and you trust that a little bit more. So the brand is able to embed their voice and message within that existed relationship between the reader and the writer. Cool. So that's a little bit about just like our pitch and our why we believe and why we know that advertising is so powerful for advertisers. A little bit of a different vein from the advertiser perspective. On the right, you'll see a dashboard that whenever an advertiser runs a campaign on beehiiv, they have a dashboard that shows them how the ad is performing and then the delivery breakdown of their ad. So they'll see the 300 newsletters that are running their ads, how many impressions, clicks, unique clicks, what the click-through rate is, and then they're able to tell us if that ad, if a given publisher is performing well or poorly. The reason I'm sharing this here is because our goal is actually to appease both the advertisers and the publishers. We want to make sure that advertisers are running ads effectively, efficiently, and at scale, but also receiving business results and seeing a positive ROI. The more feedback loops that we get from the advertiser, the better we're able to find the right newsletters for them. We'll talk about this a bit later on, but using this as knowledge to understand why spending time to kind of make sure that the ad is added to your newsletter in a way that's beneficial to the advertiser is really valuable. It builds a long-term relationship between us and the advertiser. Cool. And then a little bit more about understanding the advertiser perspective, and then I'll pass the mic over to Chris for a bit. So from an advertiser, especially a large advertiser like HubSpot, they have hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars maybe that they're deploying every month or quarter into different channels. These companies and these teams are constantly looking for different ways, different channels that they can run ads with high quality at a big scale and very consistently. In the world of digital marketing and marketing in general, there's hundreds of different channels that advertisers can choose from. So when they're testing out newsletters, they want to know that this newsletter channel stacks up against those hundreds of other channels. It's easier, it can scale, it drives really good business results. They're looking for a channel that does that. So taking that into account when you're working with an advertiser, either through the ad network or directly, is really important because you want to put your best foot forward. A couple other pieces of context. Advertisers that we work with right now are typically looking to drive lower funnel metrics. What I mean by that is they're not just trying to get in front of a lot of eyeballs. They're trying to get in front of the right people who are going to take an action that they're looking to drive. So that's either a sale, a lead, somebody signing up for a webinar like this, somebody downloading a white paper, or somebody engaging in a specific way with their content or their website. Some other context that might be helpful. A lot of times we talk to advertisers that have worked in the newsletter space before. So either they ran an ad with Morning Brew or 1440, and then they come to us and say, hey, we know that newsletter advertising works. We want to do it at scale, but we can't manually reach out to hundreds of newsletters at a time. So they'll come to us and say, hey, can you help us scale out our newsletter channel? And that's exactly what the ad network does. We'll work with a HubSpot, we'll work with an Apple or a Chase or whoever it is. We'll identify the hundreds of newsletters that make sense for them and take on the work of delivering advertising for them. Cool. Okay, I will shut up for a second. I'll pass the mic over to Chris. Quick introduction, Chris Devona is a senior marketing manager at HubSpot. We've worked with him directly for the last couple of months and have seen some really good success on beehiiv on the ad network. Chris, apologize for the last minute nature of this, but would love for you to talk a little bit about your role at HubSpot, what you guys are trying to do, and maybe a little bit of an origin around how you came to work with newsletters and what the value of the beehiiv ad network has provided you. I'll pepper you with a couple questions maybe, but yeah, would love to start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So at HubSpot here, one of the things we've been testing a lot is working with different creators and in different mediums as well. So before we started with podcasts, right, we would approach other podcast creators and say, hey, if we pay you, monthly, can we fit some ads within your podcast? And that eventually evolved into YouTube. And then since we own the hustle at HubSpot, that's one of my other responsibilities is actually growing the hustle and understanding all the metrics behind the scenes and what we could potentially sell ad slots for, even though we don't do that currently. And so then what we started to do is actually use the newsletters to drive subscribers to the hustle, and we saw what great quality that newsletters actually drove. And the more and more we looked at it, I think the best thing about newsletters is that when you're running ads on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, someone's just looking to be entertained for a little bit, right? They're not necessarily looking for anything specific. When you sign up for a newsletter, there's usually some sort of goal behind that, whether you want to learn a new skill, stay informed in a business or vertical, but there's typically some sort of driver motivation. And rather than me just pontificating about this, we actually see this in the ROI and LTV. Our newsletter leads are actually, I think, the most valuable at HubSpot currently. Clearly, we don't have the scale as our other efforts. This is a new program we just brought on this year, and this is still kind of like our pilot. We've been having great success within it. It's very much performance marketing, so we aren't just looking at impressions or eyeballs, which get really tricky with emails. especially now with all the privacy concerns and everything. So we've been driving amazing cost per lead using beehiiv and a bunch of other newsletters. And it's kind of like the Wild West out here. It's like, if you can get in now, I think now is the perfect time. I think newsletters are starting to realize the value of them. And so a lot are starting to creep up in price a little bit here and there. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an intro though of kind of how we got started, what we're looking at, what we're doing. I'd love to, answer any questions you have.
Yeah, curious to actually dig in a little bit about how you compare working with podcasts to newsletters. I think in our world, a lot of newsletters either have a podcast or they started a podcast and then wrote a newsletter, or vice versa. From an advertiser perspective, would love to hear if there's like very stark differences, or when you're working with the publication, if they have a podcast and they want to upsell you and say, hey, we also have a podcast, are you interested in sponsoring that as well? What main differences you look for, if there are any differences, or how you think about those two channels, I guess.
Yeah, you have to have very different expectations for both. For podcasts, you're just not going to get good tracking. You're just not. Like someone who visits a website afterwards, yes, you can put links in your descriptions or whatever it may be, but most people are just going to search it through Google or something. And so when you're looking at podcasts, one of the most difficult things is actually getting to a threshold that makes sense. Like if you ever, like the multi-mixed media modeling such and whatever, you actually want to run quite a bit of media in a short period of time to see what those downloads do, who stays on, how long they stay on, which is actually very similar to newsletters as well. It's just a lot easier to measure newsletters. And then in terms of value, when you're talking about what we're doing with our ad dollars, this is when I say the expectations have to be set, because if you're going after podcasts, your ROI probably isn't going to be there. It's going to be incredibly difficult. You can try to model it. You're going to need to spend a lot of money. And if it doesn't work, obviously that doesn't look so good. This is a very top of the funnel, more awareness play. It definitely funnels people into the HubSpot ecosystem. I can't apply a value to that, but we know there's value in it. So it makes it like two different conversations, because on the newsletters, we're actually getting some data to actually track some ROI and LTV back to even specific sources, which is really, really cool. So there I can show, leadership or whoever, I'm actually making X amount of money on each one of these placements I'm doing. And it's looking really good. The newsletter audience in general is a very high value audience. We do very much performance marketing newsletters. We don't really do any impressions or top of funnel. It's pretty low funnel. Podcasts, we've tried to track it. We've used dozens of different tools. We've tried hammering a bunch of spend in a small period of time to truly understand the impact. It's just really tough. And it only gets tougher as some of these tools come in and out of the market. So if you're talking added value, if you want one here or there, I'd say, okay, that's nice. It's a nice to have. It's really tough to determine the value of that. So hopefully that wasn't a non-answer, but.
No, it's interesting because in the way that people consume podcasts is actually very similar to how people consume newsletters. Obviously, we're listening versus reading, but it's much more of a lean-in experience than newsletters are, than if you were to advertise from a branding perspective on a feed-based platform. The measurement component and the fact that you're not necessarily on your phone or on your device able to click and track that click is very different.
Absolutely.
I think last question or thought, any specific strategies you guys have or deploy based on frequency? The reason I ask is because even though newsletters have been around for a while, in the advertising world, a lot of advertisers expect immediate results from a new channel, maybe not necessarily newsletters. From our perspective, if frequency works on a Facebook, Instagram, podcast, or other channel, frequency does matter then on newsletters, but that we're still doing research on that and just kind of curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, so we actually have some pretty good data on this. We get only so the only way I get credit is a net new contact. So if I hit the same list and the same person who signed up for my lead before signed up again, I get zero credit for that. So I'm very much if I'm not going to get any credit for that, I'm not going to run again. However, we've seen that a lot of these newsletters, and it's very much dependent on size, right? And also I would give you one more is the industry or vertical as well. AI right now is incredibly hot. There's new things coming out all the time. The engagement rates are hot. Everyone's subscribing to those newsletters to stay top of mind. And this goes through different motions over time, right? There's always some hot or trendy topic that those newsletters are getting a bunch of subscribers, right? And those ones are great to attack. Typically, I think our sweet spot is kind of 3 weeks on some of these bigger ones. So let's say you have 100,000 plus. We'll even say 50,000 plus. every 3 weeks is a pretty decent cadence to hit these. You can definitely do like, we've actually had some that ran like a week apart. It's just if you do those in like a short flight, let's say you do like 4 in a month, it's nice, but you definitely see some diminishing returns. We've been holding really steady on those cost per leads by letting new eyeballs filter in. And then when we attack that 3 weeks later, that performance almost looks like that first send we had. So that's kind of what we like to do, just because we have a bunch of partnerships with you and everything and others. And sort of that cadence has worked for us. Will it be the only thing that works? Absolutely not. If you want to run every week, that can work too. Just know that you'll probably see a little bit of fatigue if you go like 4 times in a month or something like that. So frequency is something we're still playing with, but kind of the early data shows that.
Sweet. I think that is the last question, but since we have the floor, there's a couple hundred folks listening or will be listening. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're advertising? Get a couple free impressions or?
Yeah. So right now, I'm in a lucky spot, right? So I have Hubspot, which obviously has a very big brand name behind it, which makes my advertising efforts a lot easier. What we're doing right now, and something I would just like give to everyone, I highly suggest that you do, is tailor the content to the newsletter. And you already said like what you guys do is you tailor the messaging, which is perfect because you don't want to be like a third party coming in and like the ad alarm going off when someone, stumbles upon that. They're like, that's an ad, skip that over. So you use the voice, but also at HubSpot, what we're offering is not anything particular. We have a catalog of hundreds, if not thousands, of content offers to get someone into the ecosystem of HubSpot. So what we're doing is we're using a lot of like free offers and resources to get people into the ecosystem and eventually start to sell them. And ROI and LTV looks really good on that. So you don't have to go for like the kill shot immediately, right? You can kind of go with just getting some personal information to start there. Begin there. So to say like, what am I advertising? It changes. So like depending on what newsletter I'm looking at, I always want to make sure I choose the best offer that I think will fit their audience, or just like, if you want to adjust a few details on that offer to fit an audience, that's another way to do it. If you don't have hundreds of offers, that's, completely fine as well. But to say there's just one thing, I don't have one thing. Definitely, if you're a fan of HubSpot or if you never heard of it for whatever reason, definitely check it out. But yeah, that's what I'll give you.
Awesome. Yeah. For the crowd listening, we'll share a couple examples of live ads that we're running with HubSpot so you can see how they look and feel. But Chris, again, appreciate you jumping on at the last minute. Feel free to stick around. I'll probably jump into the content and talk a little bit more about the ad network from the publisher perspective. But yeah, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries. Cool. Okay, gonna jump into some publisher-facing perspectives. So when we think about monetizing your newsletter, if you've been on the other webinars, I believe EJ and Daniel hosted a webinar about monetization specifically. There's tons of different ways that us as a platform and just in general you can monetize. We support you monetizing your newsletter. You can do that through paid subscriptions, boosts, the ad network, which is what we're talking about today. You can direct sell ads into your newsletter, and you can sell products and services. We're going to jump into the ad network, obviously, but during Q&A, if you want to talk about different ways to monetize, we can do that. Cool. So a couple just high-level overviews. So the way the ad network works, it's always opt-in. So we'll deliver you opportunities, we call them, to run ads with some of the top-tier advertisers we work with, like HubSpot, Netflix, Notion, etc. You don't have to run these. Our goal is to deliver you ads that relate to your content, relate to the type of newsletter that you run, and that add both value to your readers, but also add value in terms of helping you get paid. And we're not going to ever lock you into owning your inventory. There's a couple other platforms that do that. We know that you have a lot of different ways to monetize your newsletter, and we want to be one of the options. Ideally, that incentivizes us to be the best option. A little context on how much publishers have earned on the ad network. Every month, publishers earn about $500,000 through the ad network. That is continuously growing as we bring on more publishers and more advertisers. And there's hundreds of publishers earning over $1,000 a month. It's a really amazing way to have a second source of income or a main source of income if the newsletter is your main focus. And we work with a ton of top brands, so Netflix, Roku, HubSpot, Notion, hundreds of more campaigns running at any given time. If you are an advertiser or if you are a newsletter that wants to advertise across other newsletters, hit us up. We'll get you started and we'll test a couple campaigns and see if it's the right channel for you. Cool. So I'm going to jump a little bit into a 101 just to make sure if anybody's on the call hasn't run an ad. We'll kind of walk you through what you should experience on the ad network. So as I mentioned, you'll receive up to 4 or at minimum 4 ad opportunities every month. When you receive an opportunity, you'll get an email, you'll also get a notification on the platform, and you'll be able to navigate into the monetization tab on the left and specifically into ads. You'll see these two are examples of ad opportunities that a publisher would see on their platform. So Betterment, Notion, you can click into those, and that enables you to choose which creative you want to run of the available creative options, and then you choose a date that you want to run that ad in. So in this example, I chose October 23rd. I chose one of the creatives, and then you lock it in, and that tells us, hey, we should expect to see that you ran that ad, that specific creative, on the 23rd. Then when you go back into the composer, if you're writing your newsletter, all you have to do to include an ad in the newsletter is do that backslash, choose advertisement, and then you'll see a list of all the ads that you've accepted. You'll be able to click on one of those ads. That will place a placeholder. It will look like this in your newsletter. And then when you send out the newsletter, or if you click preview, you'll see that we'll dynamically write the ads into your newsletter. So this is the preview for what a Notion ad would look like. You'll see at the top of the newsletter, it says in partnership with, has a logo there, and then later down, wherever you placed the ad, you'll see the ad populate. I'll stress that when you're writing your newsletter, you're allowed to put the ad wherever you want in the newsletter. We're not going to force you to put it in the middle or at the top or the bottom. You can write the newsletter, you can place the ad wherever you think is appropriate. Cool. And then after the ad runs, we open a 72-hour window after the ad or the newsletter with the ad is sent out. So we'll track clicks and opens for a 72-hour period, and that's the number that we base on to determine how much that ad earned you. And then 96 hours after that send, after we look at that 72-hour window, lock in the number of clicks or opens, you'll get a report. I showed you the example on the right that shows you how many clicks, how many opens, what the expected earnings are, and what the status of your payment is. In terms of payments, everybody gets paid on the 20th of the following month after the ad ran. So if I ran an ad on October 23rd, November 20th, I'll get a payment directly into my beehiiv wallet. A couple other tidbits. So creative types and options, you'll see when you start receiving ad opportunities, there's primary ads and there's secondary ads. Primary ads, you'll see on the right, are typically a little bit bigger. Most primary ads will have an image. The main difference is that primary ads will have a logo at the top. So it'll say sponsored by, in this case it's MedX. Secondary ads typically end up being a bit smaller, but again, the main difference is there's no logo at the top. So this ad on the bottom, you'll see that it's just text, there's a call to action, but there's no logo at the top of the newsletter. We do have a couple limitations. So you can only include 1 primary ad per newsletter and up to 2 total ads per newsletter send. So you can include 2 secondary ads, 1 primary and 1 secondary. But if you attempt to put, say, 3 ads into a newsletter, you'll be blocked by an error. We just want to make sure that a newsletter is not chock full of ads and it creates a poor experience for the reader. We also recommend 1 ad per placement or per newsletter, just because we know it can create a better experience if most of the content is content that's written by you. I'll go into this a little bit more in the following slides, but when you're looking at the different creative types, typically a given campaign has about 5 to 10 different creative versions. Ideally, you look through those and you choose the creative version that best aligns to your style. The reason why we have 5 to 10 different versions is because we know that different publishers have different formats they typically use. So we try to create enough options that adhere to most formats that we see publishers write in. One quick example of that is if you write a newsletter that typically doesn't have images, choosing an ad that doesn't have an image will align better to your content, and to your readers, it'll feel more like the rest of your content and they'll trust that a little bit more. If there's an ad in there, it'll call it out. They'll know it's an advertisement, so they might read the content a bit differently and they might engage with it a bit less. Very important from an advertiser perspective. Advertisers want folks to read their content, engage with it in a genuine way. So if that option is there and there's an option that aligns to your style, go with that one. Cool. Couple best practices. First, play the long-term game. So it's very tempting to try to game the system. So either gaming it via clicks, fake opens, etc. We can typically suss that out. We don't see a ton of this, But when we do, it does indicate to us that that publisher might be of lower quality. It reduces the value to the advertiser, and most of the time it will enable us to identify that publisher specifically, and it'll lead to you either being removed from the ad network or receiving less ads in the future. So while this might be a short-term game, you might make a couple quick bucks, we highly suggest that you play the long-term game, and it's better for everybody involved. Adding tags and descriptions. So on your newsletter, one of the ways that we identify the right newsletters for an advertiser is based on the tags that you use and the description of your newsletter. The content helps, of course, but if you have descriptions that are up to date and tags that really represent the type of content that you talk about, that enables us to better find you when we have an advertiser that's a perfect fit. So if you started your newsletter a couple years ago and haven't updated the tags or the content or the description, go in there and make sure it's updated, and that should improve the alignment between advertisers who bring you in the content that you write. Ad volume, I just mentioned that, but yeah, 2 max per publication and then 1 primary only. Okay, so this example on the right, it's actually Daniel Burke's newsletter, and he embedded a Netflix ad into his newsletter, and you'll see that this wrapper, this section, and the way that he wrote this title for the ad is very much in line with how the rest of his content looks. Each section of his newsletter looks exactly the same. And so when you're reading the newsletter and you see this ad, it looks like it's just another section in the newsletter. So he did a really good job of embedding the ad into the format as much as he could. And then sometimes what he'll do is he'll add a couple words before and after, putting it in your tone about or his tone about the advertiser. So when people are reading it, they're shepherded into that advertisement experience from the words of the writer. So saying a couple words before and after, not necessarily having a call out that it's an ad, just kind of putting your own spin, putting your own perspective definitely helps. Cool. And then if you're on Twitter or if you're on social at all, you most likely saw that we launched CPM deals. I'll quickly go through what this is, but it's super exciting. And if you're a beehiiv user, every single beehiiv user should have received at least one CPM deal. If you didn't, feel free to DM me on Slack and we'll get you one. But a quick recap. So CPA stands for cost per acquisition. That's when, as a publisher, you might get paid when you drive a conversion to an advertiser. Cost per click is what we did on the ad network up until today. You get paid for any unique click that you drive to an advertisement. CPM is cost per milli. Technically, you get paid based on the number of opens, in our case, number of unique opens that you drive to an advertisement. The reason why this is really exciting is because a lot of publishers might experience a situation where they might have 20,000 subscribers, very engaged audience, they read the entire content, but the content is not necessarily built to be clicky. And so they see low click rates, and as a result, when you're running a CPC ad, you might not get paid as much as the value that you're providing back to the advertiser. With CPM, you're getting paid based on the number of people that are reading the content and being exposed to the ad, which enables those types of publications to earn more directly related to the value that they're providing back to the advertiser. So moving forward, you'll see a lot more CPM deals. We still will be delivering CPC deals, and in the future, we'll probably give you the option to choose between CPM or CPC. But this is new as of today, so look out for it, engage with it, and send us any feedback, any comments that you have. Things that we hear all the time. So our ad opportunity guarantee. So I mentioned this before, but every publisher who's on a paid plan is guaranteed to receive at least 4 ad opportunities every month. Most of the time, you will receive more than that. I think on average, last month, we delivered 6 to every publication that's eligible, but at minimum you'll receive 4. We get a lot of questions around what a good expected open rate is, what a good click rate is. There's other webinars that focus on growth, increasing quality, etc. But from our perspective, anything above a 35% open rate, you're in a territory where you're delivering good content. That is a very good open rate. And then click-through rates on ads. On average across the board, we see about a 0.7% click-through rate. Typically a bit lower than click-through rates on general content. Anything above 1% is very good. Anything above 2% is incredible. Anything below maybe 0.4 or 0.3 might indicate that your newsletter is just not structured in a way where it drives engagement, or it might mean that your audience isn't engaged in general, and you might want to work on building better content, focusing on aligning your content to your audience, and bumping that click rate up a little bit. How many ads can I run at a time? I think this is the 3rd time, so you guys already know this, but 2 max, suggested 1 primary at every time. And we get this question a lot about editing ad copy. So currently we don't have the ability to enable publishers to edit ad copy. We're working on potential solutions and we understand the impact of this. But at the moment, you can choose from one of the 5 to 10 different variations that we provide. Otherwise, we're working on other solutions in the future. Cool. Okay, I will open it up to questions or field questions that have already been written into that form or in chat.
Somebody wants to know, can they, with the beehiiv ad network, can they be both an advertiser and a publisher? And do they need separate accounts to do so?
We work with a lot of publishers that are advertisers as well. The ad network from an advertiser perspective is fully self-service or fully managed service. So you'd work with me with the ad network team directly. There's not yet another account. So if you do want to be an advertiser, you can reach out to me directly. We'll get you set up, or there's a form on the website that you can plug your information in and we'll reach out to you.
Somebody else wants to know, how can they attract a wider variety of advertisers? They've had a couple advertisers on their film review newsletter, and they're featuring one this weekend, but they'd like to receive opportunities from other companies and some potentially related to their niche.
Yeah, for the ad network specifically, I'll go back to that comment around tags. So maybe going in and making sure the tags are up to date. You can adjust the tags a little bit, making sure they're still related to the content. But if the current tagging and descriptions have not yielded kind of a plethora of advertisers or different advertisers, changing that up, making sure it's still accurate. But changing up those tags will affect how we find that newsletter or your newsletter. That's one way. You can DM us. We're still learning the best way to distribute advertisements. So we might be misunderstanding your newsletter and providing you different advertisers that might not be relevant. But the best way is to update those tags, update the description, put some keywords in there that you think relate to your content and the type of advertisers that you want to work with.
Good to know. We have a question here in the chat. Are people able to use, kind of bring their own ads that are not part of the ad network to their newsletter?
Yeah, 100%. So being part of the ad network and participating in an ad that was delivered through the ad network, it doesn't preclude you from going directly to advertisers that you know outside of the ad network. So you can always work with an advertiser directly. You can bring their content directly into the composer when you're writing your newsletter, paste it right in. We're working on some tooling to help make that process easier. But yeah, if you have relationships outside of the ad network, you can definitely work with them. There's nothing stopping you from that.
Great. How do you recommend users going about bringing those ads? Like, what would the process be for actually like doing kind of their insertions into the newsletter flow? Can you do a little walkthrough of what that process might be like?
Yeah, sure. I would say if you're already talking with an advertiser, provide them a media kit. So sending that advertiser a little bit of information about your newsletter. So what your content is like, who your readers are, how many readers you have, how many opens you typically drive, what your engagement rates are, developing some level of pricing. I can send out a couple of resources, and if we do another webinar, we can do a webinar specifically on selling directly. But typically if you're selling directly, you're selling flat rate ad or flat rate pricing, charging on a CPM. I'll throw out some numbers and I'll follow up with specifics so we don't have to get into the math here, but charging on say a $20 to $30 cost per milli or CPM for a deep dive in your newsletter is totally reasonable. And then it's very simple, just going back and forth with the advertiser, probably over email, collecting those assets, and then taking those assets and then just writing them into the newsletter. Doesn't need to be super complex. Typically an advertiser would like to see a preview. So once you write the ad into the newsletter, sharing the preview link to the advertisers so they can read it, review it, give you the thumbs up, and then just send it out.
To kind of do a little bit of future casting, you want to share with the folks who spent their time with us here today a little bit about what's coming down the pipe in terms of what we expect to offer in the future, both in terms of self-service, bring your own ads kind of workflow, as well as what's coming to the ad network. And with that, I'm going to drop. So
Yeah.
I hope it's a good answer. I'll go back to the recording and see you soon, Jake.
Thanks, EJ.
Bye.
Addressing what EJ brought up about the future of the ad network and the future of self-serve. So the ad network is relatively young compared to the rest of the beehiiv platform. So we're continuously growing. As I mentioned, we're already paying out about $500,000 a month to publishers just through the ad network. We're going to continue to grow and build products specifically for advertisers and publishers. Our goal is to become one of the main sources or main channels for advertisers when they think about their media mix model that Chris was talking about at the beginning of the webinar. The products that we'll introduce relate to relate to measurement, optimization meaning making sure that when we launch an ad with HubSpot, we're getting in front of the right publications, and we know that, hey, there's a music publication on the platform. We have better tooling, better data, better mechanisms to understand of the 100 advertisers we have, who are the right newsletters for this campaign. Where measurement comes in, what I mean by measurement is making sure that we deliver 10,000 opens for an advertiser, understanding which ones of those opens actually drove a conversion or whatever result the advertiser wants. So a lot of the updates over the next couple of months are going to be focused on creating better efficiencies and optimizations within the ad network. The result of that is better results for advertisers, meaning they'll come back to us and deploy more capital, and better alignment to publishers, so the right publishers get more of the right advertisements that perform well, which will result in that publisher getting paid more. EJ alluded to some self-serve work. So we know that publishers sell ads directly. We know that publishers sell courses, etc. We're designing ways that we can help bring that process in platform, and we can help you just sell directly, sell courses, sell whatever you need to sell and monetize in the way that you want to directly from the beehiiv platform. I might have missed a couple things in there, but EJ will pepper me afterwards, and we'll get it included in the content when we share it. Cool. Yeah. Display advertising on the website. I believe when we launch our TypeDream integration, that will enable us to support display advertising on the website. I think we can support it now. And if you are an enterprise user, one of our solutions engineers can help you with that. We do also support, we have a lot of publishers that come to us and say, hey, we run with Live Intent. We use Live Intent to fill our remnant advertising on the newsletter. And we also run with the ad network. That is supported. There's integrations to help continue to incorporate. If you work with a programmatic solution like Live Intent, you can run that on beehiiv. Okay, got it. So the question is, if you're a small publication, how do you get to the size, or what is the appropriate size to start monetizing? When do you start receiving ads from the ad network, and how do you grow? So on the ad network, as long as you're a paid user, we'll deliver ad opportunities to you. So it doesn't matter if you have 100 subscribers or a couple thousand. If you have 100 subscribers and you're a paid user on beehiiv, we'll deliver opportunities to you. In general, whether or not you're monetizing through advertising through the ad network or directly, I would say once you hit 1,000 subscribers, or if you're a very niche newsletter and your audience is really hard to get in front of, and you only have a couple hundred subscribers, that's totally fine. You can start going to advertisers and pitching them the ability for them to get in front of this audience that's typically very hard to get in front of. So there's no real one single answer, but I think a barometer is, and kind of a number that advertisers will look for. If you're a very niche audience, you have a couple hundred subscribers, and that advertiser knows that those subscribers are very hard to get in front of, a couple hundred might be a good indicator to the advertiser that it's worth spending their time and money with you. If you're a very broad newsletter, 1,000, maybe 5,000 subscribers is a point where an advertiser will see your newsletter. They'll recognize, hey, this newsletter will be around for a while. It's been around for a while already. It's not going anywhere. And it also just indicates that you've hit a certain critical mass. A lot of that is signaling. It doesn't necessarily represent the quality of your subscribers. You could have 40 subscribers, and those are the perfect subscribers for an advertiser. Advertisers really just want to know if they're spending their time efficiently, and they'd rather work with a publisher that's a little bit bigger. That is why the ad network exists, or a lot of it, is because we're able to string together 100 newsletters that have 40 subscribers. And then we can go to advertisers, and that makes sense for them from a time perspective, and it enables us to help you monetize. Cool, awesome. So Tony mentioned that I had said you can Slack me. I don't think that's possible, so if you want to reach out to me, my email is jacob, Jacob, @beehiiv.com. But it sounds like we've answered most of the questions. It looks like there's a good chunk of people in this webinar, so really appreciate the time. Hopefully you learned something. And reach out if you have questions, if you want to collaborate, let us know, but we'll wrap there.